Painted in 1630, Rembrandt's Andromeda chained to the rocks stands as his earliest full-length mythological female nude and a daring experiment within the genre of history painting. The work, executed in oil on panel and now preserved in the Mauritshuis, The Hague, draws its subject from Ovid's Metamorphoses. The story of Andromeda, the Ethiopian princess condemned to be sacrificed to a sea monster until her eventual rescue by Perseus. Unlike many of his contemporaries who approached the mythological nude as an opportunity for idealization, Rembrandt chose to depict Andromeda with a raw, almost unsettling realism. Her body is imperfect, rendered with soft flesh and natural proportions rather than classical ideals. The tension in her form, her head turned in fear, her arms bound, her body twisting slightly against the rock, conveys vulnerability and isolation. This divergence from the polished Venus-like archetypes of Italian and Flemish painting underscores Rembrandt's determination to humanize myth rather than transform it into a stage for decorative beauty. The painting's drama lies less in narrative action and more in psychological immediacy. Perseus and the monster are absent. The viewer encounters Andromeda alone in her moment of terror, awaiting an uncertain fate. By eliminating the larger heroic context, Rembrandt magnifies the theme of human suffering and helplessness. The composition directs the eye toward her face, flushed with fear, contrasting with the pale light that falls across her body, caught between innocence and exposure. Technically, the panel demonstrates Rembrandt's early mastery of chiaroscuro. The dark background isolates Andromeda, intensifying her fragility against the looming void. The brushwork in the rock and shadows is vigorous and rough, while her skin is delicately modeled, producing a stark textural contrast that heightens the drama. The restricted color palette, earth tones, subdued highlights, and soft flesh tones, avoids the opulence common in mythological painting, focusing instead on emotional truth. Many artists such as Titian have depicted this story by showing Andromeda, her rescuer Perseus, and the sea monster all in the same composition. Her beauty as described in her source material can be seen in some of these other works, along with Perseus's role as her rescuer. In this work, Rembrandt shies away from classical conventions by showing her not as a glamorous beauty, but as a frightened, naturalistic-looking girl. No other figure is included, but her alarmed look out of the picture space to the right creates narrative tension. The painting is an example of Rembrandt's rejection of idealized beauty. Since he did not believe true beauty existed naturally, he painted women as he saw them, naturally imperfect and flawed. Andromeda chained to the rocks represents more than a mythological subject. It reveals Rembrandt's redefinition of the nude as a bearer of human truth, rather than an object of aesthetic perfection. In placing Andromeda's vulnerability at the center, the artist transforms Ovid's tale into a meditation on fear, mortality, and the fragile dignity of the human form. This approach, radical for its time, anticipates the psychological depth that would characterize Rembrandt's later masterpieces. marking the painting as a pivotal moment in the trajectory of his early career. Painted in 1632, Rembrandt's The Anatomy Lesson of Dr. Nicolaes Tulp represents a watershed moment in the artist's career and an enduring icon of Dutch Golden Age painting. Commissioned by the Amsterdam Surgeons Guild for display in their meeting hall, the work embodies the intersection of medicine, civic identity, and the emerging humanist spirit of the 17th century. Today, housed in the Mauritshuis in The Hague, it is widely regarded as one of Rembrandt's early masterpieces. The painting depicts Dr. Nicolaes Tulp, the city's official praelector anatomiae, demonstrating the musculature of a cadaver's left arm to a group of physicians. What could have been a static record of an academic exercise becomes, under Rembrandt's hand, a dynamic composition that dramatizes the pursuit of knowledge. Dr. Tulp is not merely dissecting, he is actively teaching, his gestures and gaze imbuing the moment with intellectual authority. The assembled guild members, portrayed with individualized faces, lean in with varying degrees of curiosity, reflection, and concentration, transforming the scene into a collective meditation on science and mortality. The spectators are various doctors that had paid commissions to the artist to be included in the painting. In the top left-hand corner of the canvas, it is signed Rembrandt. For Eckert 1632, which is most likely the first recorded instance of the artist signing a painting with his forename in its original form, as opposed to using the monogram RHL, Rembrandt Harmensoen of Leiden, demonstrating his growing confidence. During the 17th century, anatomy lessons were a highly regarded social event, taking place in lecture rooms treated like actual theatres, with students, colleagues, and the general public being permitted to attend on payment of an entrance fee. The spectators were appropriately dressed for a solemn social occasion. In recent times, medical specialists have commented on the accuracy of the muscles and tendons painted by the 26-year-old Rembrandt. It is not known where he obtained such detailed knowledge, though it is likely he copied the details from an anatomical textbook. The corpse was the criminal Aris Kint, who was convicted for armed robbery and sentenced to death by hanging and executed earlier on the same day of the scene. Rembrandt chooses to partially shade the face of the corpse, giving a suggestion of umbra mortis, the shadow of death, a technique that he was to use frequently later. Light and shadow, Rembrandt's hallmark, play a critical role in shaping the atmosphere. The cadaver, centrally illuminated, becomes the silent protagonist of the scene. A body simultaneously reduced to scientific specimen and elevated as a stark reminder of human fragility. The physicians, half immersed in shadow, appear almost as participants in a theatrical performance, their expressions captured with psychological acuity. The dramatic chiaroscuro heightens the sense of solemnity, as if the pursuit of anatomical truth is inseparable from a confrontation with death. Compositionally, Rembrandt breaks from tradition. Earlier group portraits often arranged figures in rigid symmetry, but here, the figures form an asymmetrical cluster, their attention converging on both Dr. Tulp's demonstration and the illuminated cadaver. This triangular dynamic creates a visual dialogue between science, authority, and mortality. The open anatomical atlas at the bottom of the canvas grounds the scene in scholarly tradition, linking empirical practice with bookish knowledge. Beyond its immediate function as a guild commission, the painting carries broader cultural resonances. It captures the intellectual climate of the Dutch Republic, where empirical observation and rational inquiry were gaining prominence. Yet it also reminds viewers of the ultimate limits of such knowledge. The dissected body is that of Aris Kint, a convicted criminal, whose anonymity as subject contrasts sharply with the honored presence of the physicians. In this juxtaposition, Rembrandt underscores the tension between the dignity of science and the anonymity of the body it studies. As an early masterpiece, the anatomy lesson of Dr. Nicolaes Tulp demonstrates Rembrandt's ability to transcend the boundaries of portraiture. He transformed a civic commission into a meditation on knowledge, power, and mortality, themes that would continue to shape his mature works. The painting is not only a record of medical history, but also a timeless reflection on the human condition, staged with the dramatic intensity that became Rembrandt's enduring legacy. Painted around 1631, Old Man with a Gold Chain exemplifies Rembrandt's early mastery of portraiture during his Leiden period. Though the sitter's identity remains uncertain, the work conveys a profound exploration of dignity, character, and status, transcending the boundaries of mere likeness. Now housed in the Art Institute of Chicago, the painting demonstrates how Rembrandt was already developing the psychological depth and dramatic use of light that would define his later masterpieces. The subject is an elderly man, adorned with a gold chain that immediately suggests prestige and authority. Whether the chain was an emblem of civic honor or a painterly invention remains debated. Yet it serves as the visual anchor of the composition. The man's presence is not communicated through overt gesture or narrative, but through the quiet gravity of his expression and the restrained grandeur of his attire. His fur-trimmed cloak, broad hat, and richly rendered textures evoke an aura of solemnity, situating him as a figure of stature, possibly linked to civic or guild office. What sets this portrait apart is Rembrandt's treatment of light and shadow. The face emerges from a dark, undefined background, illuminated with a softness that accentuates the sitter's aged features. The furrowed brow, the weary yet dignified gaze, the subtle droop of the mouth. The chiaroscuro not only enhances the physical presence of the man, but also imbues the image with a meditative stillness. This interplay of light and darkness suggests both the vitality of worldly honor and the inevitability of decline, situating the sitter within the broader human condition. Stylistically, the work reflects Rembrandt's growing independence from his Leiden contemporaries. While other painters of the time often focused on detailed realism, Rembrandt was already experimenting with painterly freedom. The textures of fabric and fur are rendered with bold, suggestive strokes rather than meticulous precision, allowing the viewer's eye to participate in completing the image. This subtle looseness anticipates the expressive technique of his mature period. The ambiguity surrounding the sitter adds another dimension to the painting's resonance. By withholding biographical specificity, Rembrandt universalizes the portrait, transforming it from a mere record of appearance into a meditation on status, age, and mortality. The gold chain, gleaming against the somber palette, becomes both a marker of social achievement and a reminder of its transience. Old Man with a Gold Chain reveals how, even in his early career, Rembrandt could invest portraiture with layers of psychological and symbolic meaning. The painting is at once a celebration of worldly honor and a reflection on its fragility, a work that situates individual identity within the larger narrative of human experience. In this quiet yet powerful image, one already senses the depth of Rembrandt's vision, an art that speaks not only to the eye, but to the conscience and the spirit. This painting, now housed in Walker Art Gallery, Liverpool, illustrates another of Rembrandt's fascinations to dominate his art: the self-portrait. The artist completed over 75 self-portraits in oil, and it has been estimated that 10% of his entire artistic output was dedicated to the depiction of his own facial features. This offers a unique opportunity of surveying a countenance gradually changing over the course of 40 years. Rembrandt's self-portraits have left posterity a visual autobiography of an artist that is simply without parallel in the history of Western art. It is believed he had started making drawings and etchings of himself in 1628, and this habit would not stop until his death in 1669. Rembrandt often used his self-portraits for practice in order to discover for himself the range of expressions the human face is capable. As models could be expensive and impatient subjects, painting himself was a much more financial and feasible option for a young and aspiring artist to use. From the period of his first studio in Leiden, Rembrandt felt he needed a better understanding of the scope of human emotions, which he could then use to depict in his subject pictures. Also, there was a large demand for head and shoulders portraits at the time, marked by a strong facial expression. These works were known as Trony paintings. Rembrandt therefore decided to combine the self-portrait with the Trony genre to develop his own original style. In time, he realized that more normal and less pronounced and emotional portraits of himself were marketable. The Liverpool self-portrait demonstrates the features of both genres. The hallmarks of a Trony are clearly shown by the conventional head and shoulders depiction of the artist, whilst the somewhat comical, wry look and twisted mouth of the artist reveal the study of expression that the self-portrait affords the artist. Interestingly, not long after its completion, the canvas was purchased by Robert Kerr, the Earl of Ancram, who then gave it to King Charles I. Therefore, it is widely believed to be the first work by to leave the Netherlands and arrive in Britain. Painted in 1631, portrait of Nicolaes Tulp is among Rembrandt's earliest known commissioned portraits. marking a decisive step in his rise as a professional portrait painter. The sitter, Nicolaes Tulp, was a prosperous merchant involved in the fur trade, a profession that connected the Dutch Republic to the broader global networks of commerce and wealth during the Golden Age. Commissioned at a time when Rembrandt was establishing himself in Amsterdam, this portrait demonstrates both his technical virtuosity and his acute sensitivity to character, qualities that would secure his reputation among the city's elite patrons. At first glance, the painting projects authority and respectability. Tulp is depicted seated, turned slightly toward the viewer, dressed in a dark robe trimmed with fur, an attire that resonates with his mercantile profession. His right hand holds a sheet of paper, perhaps a reference to trade or accounts, subtly reinforcing his identity as a man of business. The solemnity of his pose, combined with the understated luxury of his clothing, constructs an image of a man who commanded both economic success and social standing. Rembrandt's handling of light and texture elevates this otherwise conventional portrait into a work of striking immediacy. The sitter's face, lined with age yet alert with intelligence, is illuminated against a muted background. The painter's chiaroscuro emphasizes the depth of expression, making the merchant's presence palpable. Every detail, from the glint of the fur lining to the slight roughness of the skin, is rendered with painterly precision, signaling Rembrandt's growing ability to merge realism with psychological depth. Symbolically, the portrait reflects not only the sitter's individuality but also the broader ethos of the Dutch Golden Age. In a republic where wealth was increasingly derived from commerce rather than aristocratic lineage, portraits such as this became powerful markers of social identity. Tulp is presented not as a nobleman but as a man of trade whose success granted him dignity and influence. The document in his hand serves as both a literal and metaphorical emblem, a contract, a record, a testimony to the written and financial systems that underpinned the era's prosperity. The commission of this portrait was pivotal for Rembrandt. In portraying Tulp, he secured entry into the lucrative Amsterdam portrait market, a sphere that would bring him influential clients and long-term stability. Yet even at this early stage, Rembrandt distinguished himself from other portraitists by avoiding superficial likeness. Instead, he imbued his sitter with gravitas, rendering not only the external likeness of a wealthy merchant, but also the inner presence of a man whose life was intertwined with the rhythms of trade, ambition, and mortality. Thus, Portrait of Nicolaes Tulp is more than a record of an individual. It is a portrait of a social type that embodied the Dutch Republic's rise. The painting captures the merging of personal identity with economic authority, all while foreshadowing Rembrandt's lifelong ability to give his sitters psychological depth and spiritual weight. For both artist and subject, the work stands as a monument to ambition realized, one through commerce, the other through art. Painted in 1632, Portrait of a Man, probably a member of the Van Beresteyn family, and Portrait of a Woman, probably a member of the Van Beresteyn family, now housed in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, stand as one of Rembrandt's earliest ventures into pendant portraiture for the Amsterdam elite. Commissioned at a moment when marriage portraits were a crucial visual medium for asserting social status, wealth, and lineage. The pair embodies both the conventions of Dutch portraiture and Rembrandt's innovative approach to character and realism. The male sitter is depicted with a newly fashionable lace collar, replacing the rigid millstone collars of the previous generation. His sober black attire, offset by the brightness of the lace, signals both Protestant restraint and material prosperity. The female pendant complements this carefully curated image. She wears a similarly dark gown enriched with delicate lace and jewelry, including a chain and a modestly adorned headdress. The harmony between the two portraits underscores the cultural expectation that husband and wife should be represented in visual balance, thereby projecting familial unity and continuity. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Rembrandt refuses to idealize. The man's steady, confident gaze is tempered by a certain introspection, while the woman's expression reveals composure tinged with quiet dignity. This psychological naturalism distinguishes Rembrandt from portraitists who prioritized elegance over individuality. In both works, Rembrandt combines meticulous attention to surface textures, lace, fabric, skin with a deeper concern for inner life, suggesting the sitters as complex, sentient beings rather than mere symbols of status. The pendant structure is essential. Each sitter is positioned slightly turned toward the other, a compositional device that visually binds them across the two canvases. This mirroring effect, reinforced by the alignment of light sources and similar neutral backgrounds, establishes a dialogue between husband and wife. Together, the works project not only personal identity but also the unity of a household, a theme particularly significant in the Dutch Republic where family, commerce, and civic identity were tightly intertwined. These portraits testify to Rembrandt's early integration into the Amsterdam art market, where pendant marriage portraits were in high demand. By satisfying the patron's expectations of dignity, fashion, and social representation, while simultaneously introducing his hallmark naturalism and psychological depth, Rembrandt demonstrated his capacity to navigate between tradition and innovation. Furthermore, the works mark a crucial step in his career. From Leiden history painter to Amsterdam portraitist sought after by the mercantile and patrician elite. Viewed together, the portrait of a man and portrait of a woman, probably members of the Van Beresteyn family, transcend their immediate function as commissioned likenesses. They crystallize a social and familial identity within the Dutch Golden Age, while also revealing Rembrandt's emerging genius in portraiture. As pendants, they embody the cultural ideals of marital harmony and continuity, yet through Rembrandt's hand they also achieve a timeless quality, transforming personal likeness into enduring works of psychological and artistic depth.